All right. How was the Tai Chi? Was it good? Yeah. It says yoga on the program, but it's actually Tai Chi, is that right? Yeah. Who was the Tai Chi teacher? You were, you're Tai Chi. Of course. Okay. Okay, very good. Excellent. Yeah. So, can you feel the chi? Chi flowing? Yeah. Okay. Okay, marvelous. So it's nice to have a little bit of a varied program like that, actually, because you have to look after the body and the mind. They always go together. So it's actually, it's wonderful. So, great. So I should be doing more Tai Chi and drink less coffee. I think it will be so good. Welcome. Yeah, no, that's good. You do Tai Chi as well?
No, I didn't.
No, I didn't. Okay. When I was sitting down with the Venerable Karunika, we were going through the program there, and she told me that you are the Tai Chi teacher, she said to me. It's a very naughty nun, it's very... And I wasn't sure what to think when she said that. I kind of... So I'm very glad we had a real Tai Chi teacher, actually. That's excellent. Okay, so welcome back here. And so it seems like you're enjoying yourself. That's good. I'm glad that is the case. And so we're going to look at overcoming or transcending difficulties on the path. That's kind of the next topic. And there are some very obvious difficulties that everyone has. I'm going to focus on those obvious ones. But just a couple of general ideas, first of all, about difficulties, because there's always going to be difficulties. And one of the perhaps most important things with difficulties is to regard them in the right way, to think of them as more like opportunities, if you like, than actual problems. Because the thing is that, one of the main reasons that we have difficulties, life is always going to be difficult. But the point is that the enlightened people, they don't really have difficulties anymore, right? So the problem really is in our psychological approach very often to the problems around us. And by changing our attitude, by looking at things in a new way, by perceiving the world, or perceiving people in a different light, actually you can make tremendous change. There is still like a residue of suffering left even when you become an arahant, fully enlightened, but the vast majority of suffering is gone by that stage. So basically it resides in the mind of ordinary people. And I think most of us here are pretty ordinary, not too many arahants in the crowd. If you're an arahant, please let me know. We'll give you special treatment. So what can we do then? So basically, the idea, and it's interesting because sometimes people think that in monastic life you're so lucky to be a monk, because in monastic life, sure, everyone must be really wonderful and marvelous, which is true to some extent. Yeah, I have to say that my fellow monastics are very often great people. They are people who incline in the right way, who want to do what is good in the world, who want to improve themselves and help other people. And this is kind of the general truth about monastics. But it is also true that whenever there are people coming together, there's also going to be problems, right? People are problematic. People are irritating. I think there was one famous philosopher, I can't remember who told me this. I think Jean-Paul Sartre, the French, right? Yeah. Suffering in the world is other people is suffering, or something like that. Right. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? But it's not because that is where the problems very often arise, not in other people as such, but in our relationship with other people, in that space between us and someone else. I think that was quite a perceptive comment, actually, and there's a lot of truth to that, I think. But you don't have to be kind of a world-famous philosopher to see that. I think it's fairly obvious in many ways. So we learn from that. You see other people, you find them difficult, then you start asking yourself, is there another way of perceiving these people? Is there another way of dealing with it? What can I do so that it doesn't cause me so much suffering? When other people do things that seem hurtful or seem problematic, or they don't listen to you, which happens all the time, of course. And of course there is. The answer is that we can change our attitude. And this is one of the things I want to talk about. And this is very powerful, because there comes a point when it actually gets very hard to get upset with people. It gets very difficult because you see them in a certain way. But before I get into that, I'm going to talk one of my standard suttas that I always teach on these retreats to deal with other people. But I also want to talk a little bit about, before I do that, how to one of the motivating factors to overcome the defilements of the mind. Defilements of the mind is like the problems in life, right? The things that are difficult to deal with. And one of the teachings that I really always liked with Ajahn Brahm was when Ajahn Brahm would say that there's two kinds of freedom in life. There's freedom of desire, and then there's freedom from desire. I'm sure you've heard that before, right? It's kind of one of the Ajahn Brahm standard kind of things. And it is a very important point. It gets to the core of what the Dhamma is about. The world is about freedom of desire. It's about indulging, it's about having a good time, it's about getting rid of the shackles that stop you from enjoying the world, get rid of the inhibitions, make sure you have enough money so you can do what you want, and then you're in business, then kind of the world is your oyster, and you can kind of have a good time or whatever. So that is one kind of thing, and in the suttas, the Buddha is very clear that kind of desire is actually, you are actually a slave. You're not really in charge at all. It's not a freedom at all. It's actually a problem. You are a slave, and the reason you are a slave is because the desire makes you run around in the world. It makes you restless. It makes you agitated. It gives you all of these things that actually are the opposite of peace, the opposite of real relaxation. Hopefully on this little weekend retreat, you will have moments when you feel really at ease, you feel really good about yourself, your body is relaxed, your mind is relaxed, and you kind of get a slightly, some enjoyment out of this meditation practice, etc. And that is when you start to recognize that craving actually is a problem. It is a slave driver. And the reason it is a slave driver is because usually you can't control it. If you could control it, it wouldn't be a slave driver. But usually it arises out of cause and conditions that are outside of your control. And then you can see that this is really problematic. You are a slave to craving. You think you are in charge, but that, of course, is a complete delusion. You are a slave to this thing. And so that is the freedom of desire. It's actually much worse than it seems. Perhaps there's no freedom at all. Perhaps it is actually completely wrong perception of things. And then there's the freedom from desire. And, you start to recognize that when you have a bit of peace. You start to recognize that when you actually can sit still for long periods of time and just relax and just really enjoy yourself, what you have right here and right now. And you can see there's something very powerful about the freedom from desire. And the weird thing, of course, is that, the reason we have desire, we think, is that so we can pursue the desire so that we can reach the freedom from desire. That's kind of the idea, but it doesn't work that way, as we discussed the other day. So the point I'm trying to make here is that it is not just the case that there is an important distinction between freedom of desire and freedom from desire, but actually the whole idea, I don't think Ajahn Brahm goes anywhere near far enough in describing what is going on, because it's not actually freedom of desire at all. It is imprisonment by desire. That's really what it is. So the two contrasts are, on the one hand, freedom from desire, and on the other hand, imprisonment by desire. You are in your cell. You are compelled to act when really what you want to be is peaceful. And this is one of Ajahn Brahm's other kind of great similes, is where he says that, when we live in this world, we are imprisoned by our defilements. Actually, what we are doing when we're kind of enjoying that craving, it's like we are sitting in our cell and we're painting it in our favorite color, but we're still in the cell, So they haven't really solved the issue by just by painting your, I don't know what your favorite color is. Favorite color, okay, whatever. Doesn't really matter. You get the idea. So this is the problem, and so it is really imprisonment by desire versus freedom from desire. That is really the distinction that we're dealing with here, and the problem, in very large part, the reason we can't see this, even though it is obvious when you reflect on it, is because it feels like these defilements are my defilements. I am in charge. I choose to get upset because it is right to get upset in this situation. People are doing bad things. Somebody needs to say something. And I'm going to be the one who says something. The war is evil. Someone needs to tell these people off and to kind of tell them the right way. So it feels very often that it's kind of righteous. Yeah, it's a righteous anger. There are real problems, and when there are real problems, then anger is the right approach to dealing with these issues. And so it feels like you think, I am deciding to become angry. But of course, you're not deciding to become angry at all. And this is where you need to investigate a little bit. And the way to find out that you're not deciding to become angry is to try to stop and never get angry at anything. And the moment you say, I'm never going to get angry again, well, that moment you realize, actually, it's not as simple as that. You cannot stop these things. And the reason you cannot stop them, you can stop them, but it takes a long, long time. You can't do it overnight. The reason you can't do it is because these are conditioned phenomena. These are habits. These are traits that we bring into this existence from previous lives, from a long, long time back, that have been programmed into us. We are like robots. Can you feel your inner robot getting angry? And when you feel your inner robot getting angry, that's when you know that this is a problem. So these are conditioned responses that we cannot really control. All we can really do is, over the long term, we can develop out of these things by reflecting wisely, by being smart about how we live our lives. So you are trapped by your anger. And once you understand that you are trapped by these things, at that moment you want to be a bit rebellious, right? You want to say, actually, I don't want to be trapped by anger. I want to be in charge. You're not in charge if you get angry, because actually something else is in charge. And in the suttas, the Buddha does talk about what it means to be in charge, having power over yourself. And these are some terms that he uses in the Anguttara Nikaya called the Sati Adhipateya and Samadhi Adhipateya. And Adhipateya basically means you are a master. You are a master of something. So Sati Adhipateya means that you have mastery through mindfulness. Samadhi Adhipateya is mastery through Samadhi. So these are the two things. And that is when you feel in charge of yourself for the first time in your life. Because when you have sati, if your mindfulness is really strong, it means that you are aware of what is happening inside of you. If you feel that some kind of unwholesome state is about to arise, some kind of ill will, maybe some kind of excessive desire or whatever, the moment you feel that, you can take a different course. You can look at the situation in a different way. You can use some of the contemplation that you have learned and go in a different direction. You feel in charge of yourself. It doesn't feel like your conditioning from the past is in charge, because you counteract your past conditioning by reflecting wisely, by using yoniso manasikara or sati sampajanya or whatever to lean the mind in a new direction, overcoming the conditioning and the unwholesome qualities that you take with you from the past. So mindfulness, when it becomes powerful, has the ability to direct the mind in a new way. So sati adhipateya, mastery through mindfulness, is a beautiful idea. This is not Mickey Mouse mindfulness, right? It has to be real, kind of the real powerful mindfulness. Mickey Mouse mindfulness is not bad. We have to start somewhere. So we start with ordinary mindfulness. I don't mean to put down Mickey Mouse mindfulness, but it's okay. It's better than not having Mickey Mouse mindfulness. So we start with that, and that's good, because it already gives you some idea of what's going on. And then you go from Mickey Mouse. What's the step up from Mickey Mouse mindfulness? Minnie Mouse. Okay, Minnie Mouse is one step higher. Okay, and then maybe Double Duck. I don't know what the highest one is. I'm not sure. But eventually, it becomes a power in your life. It becomes one of these ballas. Ballas are the powers in Pancha Bala, the 5 powers in the Buddhist doctrines, whatever you want to call it. And then, of course, comes the samadhi. Samadhi is even more powerful, because when you have samadhi, the mind is very, very steady, very certain, very clear. You know exactly what is going on. You can always direct the mind. That is why this is called mastery through samadhi. And so that is the kind of the anger or the ill will side of the equation. But it is equally problematic with desires. It's even harder to see with desires, because desires really feel like they are yours. I pursue this because I want to pursue this, right? I pursue the nice food because I want to pursue the nice food. There was like a Norwegian restaurant in there today. I was amazed. All this kind of Norwegian fish and Norwegian stuff. That was amazing. It's like coming back to Norway. And it was offered by a Sri Lankan. It's kind of someone with Sri Lankan background. It's very it's interesting, isn't it? All you have to do, he told me, he went on the internet, looked up Norwegian kind of food, and then he kind of, okay, let's cook this. It's going to be good. So it's very, very sweet when people do these things. But so why do I like Norwegian food? Actually, I like all kinds of food. I don't really need Norwegian food, but it's very sweet when people do it. But why do I like it? Well, it's because of conditioning. Yeah, I grew up in Norway, at least in part. That's why I like skiing. I like skiing as well. I used to like skiing. Probably don't like it anymore, but I used to like it. You've been conditioned in a certain way. And those desires are just as conditioned as the ill will is. You come into this world with a certain proclivity, certain inclinations of the mind, and then they drive you forward, and you think that you want this thing. You think it's your choice to follow these things. This relationship looks like it's going to be a good one, so you're going to follow through on that one. And you're driven by these deep-seated things that you cannot actually, you don't really know any alternative. And it feels like you are doing this. Is my choice. This is me. I'm doing this. And because it feels like you, because it's part of your identity, then, of course, it's a very powerful sense that you have to do these things, that you are in charge. But of course, it isn't your identity at all. You may not even have an identity as far as Buddhism is concerned. And you start to understand, again, once you start to try to restrain those desires, to hold back, you start to realize, actually, it is not up to you. These are conditioned things. So notice that. And the more you notice that, the more, again, rebellious you will become. If you notice that you are not really in charge, and you also notice that it is a problem that leads you astray and leads to all kinds of things, you become the slave of these things rather than you being the master, then, of course, you want to do something about this. So understanding the issues then gives you the motivation to do something. And then, gradually, you can develop out of these things because you know it is a real problem. So that is just a little bit by way of background. I always thought, I really loved Ajahn Brahm's distinction between freedom of and freedom from desire, but I want to take it one step further. Actually, it's not really freedom at all. Freedom of is actually the imprisonment by desire. So I'm going to now read you a sutta. One of the things I always like to do is to bring out the word of the Buddha, because to me that is where ultimately we should all find the inspiration on the Buddhist path. So I'm going to kind of try to instill the word of the Buddha in you. I don't know, you may already read the suttas, I'm not sure, but in case you don't, this is my chance to brainwash you a little bit into kind of getting used to the suttas. So this is actually a sutta that is not spoken by the Buddha, after all, spoken by Venerable Sariputta. But Venerable Sariputta, he was like the Buddha's right-hand monk. We don't have him on the shrine here, we just have the Buddha. It's amazing how you transform this room. I have to really commend you for transforming this. When we first came in, it looked like some kind of movie theater, and now it actually looks like a real meditation room. I mean, it's astonishing what you did. So well done. But Venerable Sariputta did not make it, so he's not here. But when you look at the Buddhist shrine, traditional Buddhist shrine, Venerable Sariputta is always going to be on the Buddha's right-hand side, so closer to me, and Venerable Mahamoggallana on the other side. And they look different, So Venerable Mahamoggallana, he always has his hands in Anjali. All disciples have their hands in Anjali, except one, Venerable Sariputta. He has his hands like this. He has a sense of confidence about him. He was kind of the number one in teaching the Dhamma after the Buddha. So when we see a sutta given by Venerable Sariputta, usually it's kind of a good sign. It's kind of, Buddha said, okay, if anyone is going to roll the wheel of the Dhamma, if I can't do it, Venerable Sariputta is the one. He says that in the suttas. So let's say what he has to say. So this is the sutta on dealing with resentment, dealing with anger and ill will, in other words. And if you have listened to me before, you probably heard me talk about this before, but I don't care. I'm going to talk about it again. it's good to hear these things many times, because repetition is really powerful. I was just mentioning again to Venerable Karunika, we're just talking a little bit before, and I was saying, I always teach the same thing, and he said, no, that wasn't what I wanted to hear. But anyway, the thing is that when you read the word of the Buddha, actually the word of the Buddha is also very repetitive. And one of the things about the word of the Buddha, it is repetitive, but it's also small changes in the way he says things, right? It may seem like repetition until you look at the fine detail. And the moment you look at the fine detail, you find small things that actually make it really worthwhile to see those things again. It gives a slightly different angle on the same problem, slightly different way of looking at things. So repetition is good. And every time we hear something again, we should always try to have this idea of the Zen mind, beginner's mind, trying to hear things afresh every time, and not think, same teaching again, okay, whatever, then you're going to go to sleep because you're kind of fed up with hearing this teaching. But I must admit, you can imagine me teaching these things. I do, how many retreats like this do I do every year? I don't know, 10 maybe per year, and often 9-day retreats, long ones. I teach this sutta, same sutta on every single one, 10 times a year, times how many years, 10, 15 years going, something like that. And I enjoy it almost every time, because every time I read them, I try to put something into it. I try to read them with fresh eyes, try to understand them again. So I think this is actually really useful to hear things again. And we all develop, we all change over time. You come on one retreat, next time you come around, you have changed. I have changed. Everyone else has changed. So for this reason, things are actually fresh every time. It's like Ajahn Brahm's stories. I don't know how many times I've heard his stories. You think you have heard Ajahn Brahm many times. Imagine how many times I've heard Ajahn Brahmali. He gives a talk every Wednesday in the monastery. I've been in that monastery for almost 30 years. 50 times 30, well, that's a lot of. But I still love listening to Ajahn Brahm, even after all that time. And I love it, first of all, I love it because, yes, I've heard a lot of it before, but it puts it into a new context. Slight elaborations on what he has said before. And very often it has this profundity about it. The way he talks is more important than actually what he says. And then it becomes beautiful regardless. And I recognize it's my own fault if I don't enjoy it. And if I say, Ajahn, I've heard this before, I don't say it, I think that, of course, I wouldn't say that to Ajahn Brahm. Actually, sometimes I probably do, but it's actually my fault for not really being able to bring the fresh mind out to listening to these things. So anyway, so here we go. So just kind of giving you that background just to warn you. So this is the sutta where Venerable Sariputta talks about the 5 ways, or the 5 people for whom we should overcome resentment. Resentment, in other words, ill will or anger or resentment, basically the same thing. And so he talks about 5 kinds of people in here. He talks about the people whose bodily behavior is impure, but the verbal behavior is pure. Then the people whose verbal behavior is impure, but the bodily behavior is pure. Then the person whose bodily and verbal behavior is impure, but again an openness and clarity of the mind every now and again. Then the person who is bodily and verbal behavior is impure, and they don't get the clarity of the mind. And then the last one is the person whose bodily and verbal behavior is pure, and they get the clarity of the mind. You got those 5? Never mind, I'm just messing around. You don't have to remember those 5. The main point about these 5 is that it spans the spectrum of all kinds of people, from the very saintly to the very, very dodgy on the other end. It kind of spans everyone in between. And so what he's saying here is that we shouldn't really have resentment towards anyone. There's not like that one person I really hate. That one is kind of excluded from my metta. Everyone else okay, but not that one person. No, we cannot afford to have any enemies in this world. Remember that. Our job is to, at the very least, have compassion for other people, even though we may find them very difficult in many ways. That is our job. As Buddhists, the idea of having ill will towards anyone is going to be an obstacle for whom most of all? For ourselves most of all. And how other people treat us, actually, it's none of our business. It's not our problem really. It is their problem how they treat us. So remember that. That's, okay, it's always going to be people who don't like you. There's always going to be people who think you are a bad person. There are people who didn't like the Buddha, for goodness sake. If they didn't like the Buddha, what about us? We're not, of course there are going to be people like that. And this is just because of the diversity of people, the diversity of perceptions in the world. It's always going to be like that. So don't worry about other people. If they don't like you, it's not your fault. It's none of your problem. It's their problem. If they don't like a kind and good-hearted person, so I'm sure that everyone here is kind and good-hearted. And even if you're not kind and good-hearted all the time, that's okay. At least you're on the path. Everyone here deserves respect. So if someone doesn't respect you, it's not your problem. It's their problem. It's a very important point, by the way. You don't have to be perfect to deserve respect. But the fact that you're trying, that is worthy of respect. So let's see what he has to say. I'm going to go through these in the order that they appear in the sutta. I'm just going to read it out to you and then comment on this a little bit. So he says, Venerable Sariputta says, how should you get rid of resentment for a person whose behavior by way of body is impure, but whose behavior by way of speech is pure? Suppose a mendicant wearing rag robes sees a rag by the side of the road. They would hold it down with the left foot, spread out with the right foot, tear off what was intact, and take it away with them. In the same way, at that time, you should ignore the person's impure behavior by way of body and focus on the pure behavior by way of speech. That is how you get rid of resentment for that person. So you have this beautiful simile here of the rag robe wearing monastic. So see this here. This is kind of on the way to becoming. This is not really a rag robe, but it's kind of moving in that direction because it's getting more and more patches on it. I'm really proud of my patches. This is a real rag robe. Whoa. Okay.
No, it's not made from rags, but it's made from
many patches. That's really cool. It's hard to see because they are so. The colors are so similar here. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so you're actually much more authentic than I am. I really point to you. You are the real deal here. So it's really nice. I used to have a really good rag robe as well, actually, but that's kind of many years ago now. So I'm really glad you're taking up the kind of the baton, and that's marvelous. So anyway, so when you are a rag robe wearing monastic, then of course you're on the outlook for rags because you have to sew up your robe all the time. It's always falling apart a little bit. Is yours falling apart a little bit? It's well stitched together. Okay, okay, well done. Excellent. So you're always kind of on the outlook for rags, yeah. And so you're looking around, you're walking along the road, and you find kind of rags in various kind of places. And then you find this rag. And before I say anything more, this is another story I tell on all of these retreats because it's a kind of fun story from the Vinaya Pitaka. Because I've translated the Vinaya Pitaka, I know kind of the content reasonably well. And this is one of the places you would find rags in ancient India was on the charnel grounds. Yeah, the places where you burn the corpses. Because the corpse would always be kind of wrapped in a rag for modesty's sake or whatever. And then the monks would come and unwrap these corpses to get the rags, right? And so there was this one monk, and he got to this corpse very soon after this person had died. The corpse was still warm. It wasn't cold yet. And when a corpse is warm, you have to be careful, because the spirit might still be connected to that corpse. So he starts unwrapping the rag, yeah? And then as he starts unwrapping the corpse starts speaking to him, "Don't take my robe or take my rag, yeah? Don't take it off." And the monk says, "You're dead, shut up." I don't know if it says that, that's kind of for special effects. But anyway, he doesn't listen, right? This poor corpse is pleading, "Please don't take my rag. I'm naked, for goodness sake. It doesn't matter you're dead if you're naked or not." So he takes this rag, right? And he kind of starts walking off. And then when he starts walking off, the corpse rises up. It's like the first zombie in the history of human. I mean, one of the kind of amazing things when you start to read the sutta is that there's all these things in there, which you kind of see now in the movies, and you think that has only existed for the last 30, 40 years. It was invented by Steven Spielberg or something. No, it's existed throughout humanity. It's always been there. Zombies, what came first in the Buddhist text. Most things are found in the Buddhist text before they were anywhere else. Well, many things anyway. And so he runs off with this rag, and he runs back to his cutie, and the corpse is coming behind him, getting closer and closer, just like the zombie movies, closer and closer. And then he runs into his cutie, slams the door shut, and then the corpse, bang, falls down on the outside. And that is the original zombie story, straight from the Sutta of the Vinaya Pitaka. So there's some entertaining things in there, right? There's pretty kind of awesome stuff. The Vinaya is not as boring as some people will have it. But anyway, so that is the kind of the zombie story. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about removing resentment. But so coming back to the main issue again, yeah. So you go by the roadside. You find a rag lying kind of in the trenches, the ditches on the roadside. And you can imagine what it looks like when you have a rag lying in the trench. It's kind of rotten and dirty and ugly. So you kind of take it out. You kind of, as I said, that you spread it out with your foot. You step on one foot, you spread it out with the other foot. And the idea is to get an overview of this rag. You can see the whole thing. You can see which part is nice, is useful, and which part is bad. You get an overview, and then you tear off one section, and the rubbish part, what you do with it, you throw it out. You're not interested in the rubbish part. And then the good part of the cloth, you fold it up nicely, and then you take it maybe in your pocket or your bag. They often had bags in those days. You take it in there and you carry it with you, and then when you need that rag, you use it and you sew it into your robe. And human beings are a bit like that. Human beings are complex. There are many sides to them. They have some rotten sides, like the rotten cloth, and they have some beautiful sides, like the beautiful part of the cloth. Yeah, so you kind of spread all these qualities out, and you look at them, the good qualities, the bad qualities. You tear off halfway, or 60%, or whatever it is, the proportion of good to bad. You tear off the bad stuff. You crunch it all up, and you chuck it out. Why? Because it's rubbish. The bad qualities in other people, whether they have them or not, we see bad qualities. It's rubbish. It's bad. It doesn't really solve any problems for us. It blocks us in our spiritual practice. So this is what you do. You throw out the good ones, and you take the good qualities. You take them into your heart. You shelve them in your mind like a perception at your shelf. And then when maybe one day you feel some negativity, ill will, or resentment towards that person, you go into that little shelf in your mind. You take out down that perception that you have built up, because you know that there are good qualities there, and you remind yourself of the good qualities, and then that overpowers the negative perception you have of that person. And this is very powerful, very, very powerful technique. It wouldn't be in the suttas if it wasn't very powerful. But for it to work, you have to practice it. You really have to remind yourself of the good qualities of the people around you. And one of the things about being part of a Buddhist community, having all of these kalyana mittas, is that the people around you are generally very good people. Yeah, people who come on a retreat like this, you wouldn't be here unless you already had a lot of potential at the very least. And probably you are already in many ways really good as well. So these are really marvelous people around you. Just like my monastic brothers and sisters in the monasteries around Australia or elsewhere in the world are often very, very good people. And I need to remind myself of that. Their intentions are good. They want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, some of their qualities, some of the conditioning they have from the past is going to sometimes make them do things that are not 100% kind all the time. But their intention, their motivation, their desire is to be good. And in many cases, they are also going to be very remarkable people. And the same is true for everyone here today. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Everyone here deserves respect. Otherwise, there's no way you would be here if you didn't deserve that respect as a spiritual practitioner. And remember that with the people around you. And especially when we are on a retreat like this, when we are living together, it's very easy to get on each other's nerves, when you live very close together. Maybe not for maybe 2 days, it's okay. But if, let's say, you're on a 9-day retreat, after 9 days, you really had it with some of those people who you're living with, because they do things in a different way. And this is this nature. But when you remember the big picture, when you remember the overall intention and the qualities of that person, then these little things don't really matter. Yeah, other people are irritating. Yeah? Other people are suffering. And suddenly that stops to be the case because you see the bigger picture. Yeah. So this is kind of the idea here. This is what this is about, and it's a very beautiful way of looking at other things. Now you may say, and this is one of the kind of the arguments I sometimes hear when I talk about this. You may say, but is that really realistic? Just to look at the good qualities in people? Aren't we here to see things according to reality? This person does have bad qualities. If I'm going to be realistic, I've got to see those bad qualities. Right? Wrong. And the reason why it is wrong is because we don't really know what other people are like. Yeah? We cannot really tell. We have one impression of a certain person. We know some of their qualities. We don't know other qualities of that person. One person will see this person as bad. Another person will see them as good. You cannot pin people down. People are always fluctuating. One morning we wake up, we are all merry and happy, we're kind to the whole world. The next day you wake up, you're really in the dumps, yeah, and you don't want to say a kind word to anyone because you're having a bad day or whatever. I'm not saying anyone here is like that, but And so the mind is so variable. So which one of these are you? Are you the nice one or are you the bad one? Or are you both? Are you neither? Yeah, and this is so we cannot really pin people down. We cannot really compare people. And because there is no scale we can use and decide, because there is no reality really, there's another question that we need to ask, and that is not what is real, but what is beneficial. That is what matters. And what is beneficial is seeing the good qualities in other people. Because when we see the good qualities, it's good for us. Because we grow, we feel good, we get more happiness out of it. But it's also good for the other person. Because when you see the goodness in others, that goodness tends to grow in them. Have you noticed that? When you focus on the bad qualities in other people, it's almost as if they kind of give up. Yeah, they say, yeah, I'm going to think I'm bad anyway, I might as well be bad. Yeah, no one really believes in me. Yeah. But I have noticed in myself, when people see the good qualities in me, and then I feel really encouraged. And I want to be more kind, more caring towards other people. I don't want to let down those people who see the goodness in me. And this is one of the reasons it's such a wonderful thing to be a disciple of Ajahn Brahm. Ajahn Brahm always sees the good in you, always. Even when I'm not good at all, he still sees the good in me. I don't know how he does it, but he does. And that's kind of really encouraging. So around Ajahn Brahm, I always try to be my best. I don't always succeed, but I kind of try to kind of live in the right way. So when we are kind to others in this way, by seeing the goodness in them, we're actually helping them to be good people. It is a gift to others, seeing the goodness in the people around us. It's a gift to ourselves, because we feel good, and it's a gift to the other person. So please do this. It is not that hard. It takes a bit of time to recondition your mind, to see people in a new way, but it's not that difficult to do. And most people here have no problem doing this if you give it if you really try and you kind of give it a bit of time, you're going to get there one day. So this is the idea of metta, really, on the Buddhist path. Metta is seeing the good qualities in other people. This is what is going on here. So let us go on to the next one. We have 5 to go through. This was kind of one of the more involved ones, but I want to have a look at the other 5 as well before time is up, as they say. So let's have a look at some of the other ones here. Okay. So this is the second kind of person, right? How should you get rid of resentment for a person whose behavior by way of speech is impure, but whose behavior by way of body is pure? Suppose there was a lotus pond covered with moss and aquatic plants. Then along comes a person struggling in the oppressive heat, weary, thirsty, and parched. They would plunge into the lotus pond, sweep away the moss and the aquatic plants, drink from the cupped hands, and be on their way. In the same way, at that time, you should ignore the person's impure behavior by way of speech, and focus on the pure behavior by way of body. That is how you get that is how to get rid of resentment for that person. So here you have it's a similar situation as before, but now we have swapped around the speech and the body. Yeah, so now it is another aspect of the person that is good, another aspect of the person that is bad. I don't know what the meaning of this is. It probably just means that people are complex, and some people are good in this way, some people are bad in that way. We need to have a bit of flexibility with our perceptions to see the good qualities in other people. And the person here is the simile here is like a lotus pond. Yeah, so the lotus pond is like the person. The lotus pond is covered with moss and algae and all kind of stuff. The moss and the algae are the bad qualities that you see in that person. And so you come to this lotus pond, and when you come, you are struggling in the oppressive heat. That is the idea of being resentful and angry. Anger is like heat. Yeah, you feel hot when you are angry, and you feel kind of all this energy inside of you, which is kind of this person is wise. They probably want to get rid of it. You are weary, thirsty, and parched. You're trying to find a solution to the heat, trying to overcome this. And so what do? You plunge into that lotus pond. You sweep away the moss and the algae, the aquatic plants, because they are the bad things. You don't have anything to do with them. You sweep them away. And then you use your cupped hands and you drink. You take in all the good qualities that are there under the surface. You imbibe it. You drink it. You fill yourself up with the good qualities of that person. So this is another kind of beautiful way of thinking about how you carry the good qualities of other people with you. Whereas the bad qualities, you just push them to one side. You don't have anything to do with that. Why? Because it is oppressive. It is wearing. It is problematic. And so you get rid of them in this way. This is kind of the idea behind this. So very similar to the previous one, just the simile that is a bit different. And the similes are, I love the similes of the Buddha. They're so often so. This is not even from the Buddha, from Masai Buddha, but they're still great. So let's go on to the next one here. And how should you get rid of resentment for a person whose behavior by way of body and speech is impure, but who gets an openness and clarity of the heart from time to time? Suppose there was a little water in the cow's hoof print. Then along comes a person struggling in the oppressive heat, weary, thirsty, and parched. And they might think, this little bit of water is in the cow's hoof print. If I drink it with my cupped hands or a bowl, I will stir it and disturb it, making it undrinkable. Why don't I get down on all fours and drink it up like a cow, and then be on my way? So that's what they do. In the same way, at that time, you should ignore that person's impure behavior by way of body and speech, and focus on the fact that they get an openness and clarity of the heart from time to time. That is how to get rid of resentment for that person. So here is someone who doesn't have all that many good qualities, bad speech, bad bodily conduct, and all they have this clarity of the openness and clarity of the heart. Well, this is the Cetaso Vivarana in the Pali, and it's the opposite of the Nivarana. Nivarana are the 5 hindrances. This is the Pancha Nivaranas, what you have in the sutras all the time. These are the things that block the mind and cloud the mind and stop meditation. The Vivarana is the opposite of the 5 hindrances. It's the opening of the mind. So here is someone, even though they are a bit of a dodgy character, they have some underlying good qualities, and we should always focus and try to see if we can see any good qualities in the other person. That's kind of the idea here, always being able to see the goodness in others. And I think that one of the reasons why this is mentioned in this way is that sometimes you meet people in the world who may have, some deep meditation experiences, but because of their past conditioning, they still are a bit of a scallywag character, that do some strange things and dodgy things. But we have to be very careful with not judging people too fast and seeing if there's something good there, to actually see that and then take it on board. And then be like this cow, drink the water, a tiny bit of water, because most of the water, the rest is just dry, barren, bad stuff. A tiny bit of water to be drunk. Yeah? And the only way you're going to do it is you're going to get down on all four and suck it up like a cow. This is the cow's practice of mindfulness. And what the point of this is that we should go as far as we can with seeing good qualities in other people. This is really the point of this. If there is something good there, we should focus on the goodness. And what this means is that, we have the scheme of the four Brahma Viharas, the four divine abidings. And in the four divine abidings, metta always comes first, loving kindness, friendliness, etc., always comes first. The next one is karuna. Karuna is compassion. Then comes mudita, then comes upekkha. The four Brahma Viharas. And everything in Buddhism is sequential. So when metta comes first, it means that metta is the primary of these four Brahma Viharas. That is the main thing we should focus on. Yeah, and this is what we're seeing here. We're seeing here that even though someone has a lot of bad qualities, we should do our very best to see the good qualities in that person. We should try really hard. And I think there's a good reason for that. And the reason for that is because when we do compassion practice comes next, by the way. When we do compassion is very close to seeing suffering, seeing problems, seeing bad qualities. Yeah, and because it is close to seeing suffering, compassion can very easily be tinged by a sense of sadness, maybe, at the suffering in the world and these kind of things. So we want to be careful not to kind of get these things wrong. It's a very common problem in Buddhist circles that people focus too much on compassion and they feel kind of the energy is drained and they can't really function in the world because they try too hard to have compassion. And that is what we want to try to avoid. So it's important to focus on the good qualities, because when you see the good qualities in other people, you're always going to feel energized by that. You're never going to feel drained by those things. It's always going to have a positive outcome. So metta, for that reason, is very, very important and significant. And that is, I think, really the message here, the importance of starting with metta. Then comes compassion if the metta doesn't work. So now let us look at compassion, because what do you do if there are no good qualities to be seen? This is the next one. The person who has no good qualities by speech, no good qualities by action, by body, and no opening of the mind. Everything is just defiled all the way to the core. What do we do then? Well, the first thing to remember when that is the case is that we don't actually know that the other person is defiled in this way. It's just our perception. And it's a very important point to remember, because very often we may judge another person as being a bad character or whatever, but actually it's just our view of that other person. We don't actually know them all that well. It's very hard to know people fully, as I mentioned before. So instead of saying that this is a bad person, we have a sense of humility about our own judgment. And we say, okay, I don't really know. I can only see bad qualities in them, but I could be wrong. And what that does, it allows you to change your mind down the track when good qualities may appear in that person. You don't kind of write them off once and for all. And there is a certain harshness in writing people off once and for all. It's like, you make a judgment that is final. This is it. They are bad. They are evil. Don't want to have anything to do with them. There's a lack of compassion there, of understanding that we're all changeable. We're always moving around. There's even the people you hate the most or like the least in this world, quite likely they have good qualities. Remember when you see the news, you read the news, remember you don't never get the full story. Newspapers are always slanted in one way or another. You will notice how news channels tend to have a political slant. There's slants by it. You have right-wing media, and you have left-wing media, and then you have a few who try to kind of remain in the middle. But they always tend to have a bias. And because they have a bias, they're going to talk bad about some people and good about other people. Like everyone else, they have a bias. So don't trust, I'm not saying you should distrust the media completely. I'm not one of those people. But I say that don't also have a little bit of skepticism when you read these things. Don't take it all kind of as you read it either. So be wise about these things. So don't box people in. Don't place them in the evil box once and for all, because that is also not really being compassionate to other people. Allow people the opportunity to grow out of their bad qualities. That is a sign of kindness already. So that is the first thing to recognize about this. You have people who are all bad. It is our perception ultimately, and not really necessarily the reality that underlies it. But still, what do we do? And this is what Venerable Sariputta says. How should you get rid of resentment for a person whose behavior by body and speech is impure, and who doesn't get an openness and clarity of the heart from time to time? Suppose a person was traveling along a road, and they were sick, suffering and gravely ill, and it was a long way to the nearest village, whether ahead or behind, and they didn't have any suitable food or medicine or a competent carer, and someone to bring them within a village. Then another person traveling along the road sees them and thinks of them but nothing but compassion, kindness, and sympathy. Oh, may this person get suitable food or medicine, or a competent carer, or someone to bring them within a village. Why is that? That they don't come to ruin right here. In the same way, at that time, you should ignore the person's impure behavior by body and speech, and the fact that they don't get an openness and clarity of the heart from time to time, and think of them with nothing but compassion, kindness, and sympathy. Oh, may this person give up the bad conduct by way of body, speech, and mind, and develop good conduct by way of body, speech, and mind. Why is that? So when their body breaks up after death, they are not reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld in hell. That is how to get rid of resentment for that person. So when you see bad people, have compassion. Understand that they don't know what they're doing. No one in this world wants to destroy their own life. No one wants to be reborn in a bad destination, whether it's a metaphorical rebirth right now, whereby you just feel like you are in a bad state, or it is a real rebirth in the future. Nobody wants to cause suffering for themselves. We all want to create happiness in our life. And sometimes we don't understand how to create happiness. Sometimes we think that we will create happiness for ourselves by doing bad things, by treating other people badly, because we are blind, because we're walking in darkness, because we are deluded, because we have no idea what's going on. So when you see someone behaving badly, when you see someone doing dodgy things, remember they're actually trying to find happiness in one way. That is one way of thinking about this other person. But actually, even though they want happiness for themselves, they are beginning to create like a hell realm for themselves, in a sense. So when you see that, you can start to have a sense of compassion. They don't have no idea what they're doing. They're absolutely blind to what is going on. And this becomes a beautiful turning around. Instead of getting angry with other people who do bad things, you turn around your whole mind and you have compassion for them instead. There's something very beautiful about this, because very often, especially, this is quite easy to do when someone is doing bad things and they're far away from you and they're doing it to other people. But when they're doing it to you, it's more difficult. When someone is kind of in your face and they're saying things that are unpleasant or doing unpleasant things to you, then it's much more difficult. But it can be done then too. Remember, this person is not really, it's nothing to do with you, the way they are. They're not doing it because of you. They're doing it because of their own inner conditioning, their own inner programming. They're doing it because they're blind. They're doing it because of past lives. They're doing it because of their programming, going deep, deep into the past. This is one of the things that is so interesting about the idea of rebirth. It gives you an additional dimension to this whole idea of being conditioned. The conditioning is so deep. We have no idea what's going on. So when you see this, turn the table around. Instead of getting upset with this other person because they are doing bad things to you, actually, you think, wow, you have a problem. You are in trouble. You need to change. If you don't change, you're going to go down this road in the desert where there's no one to help you. There's no doctor. The doctor is probably like the Buddha. There's no village in front or behind. There is no medicine. It's like the Dhamma is the medicine, right? None of that is available. Because none of that is available, you cannot lost in the world. And when I try to teach you the Dhamma, you don't want to even hear about this Dhamma I'm going to teach you, even though it's such a powerful teaching. So instead of having this small, little, narrow world my world. You know what it's like to be selfish. You know what it's like to live in your own little world with your desires and your things. It's a small world. But the world outside seems scary. The world outside seems like they're always trying to take advantage of you. When we are greedy, when we're not generous with others, it's like me against the world. And you get these walled communities, where you have kind of barbed wire on the top and everyone is trying to kind of keep all the beggars out or what have you. And you get these terrible ways in which we segregate ourselves from the rest of humanity. And it's this tiny little world of yours. A kind of you, and everyone else seems like a danger to you. But then you turn the table around. Instead of seeing the world around you as a danger, you open your heart even to people who are very difficult, and you have compassion for them. And suddenly when your heart expands out, you take away those barriers. It's no longer your tiny little world against the rest of humanity or parts of humanity, but now you embrace everyone, whether they are dangerous, whether they are difficult, whether they are angry or whatever. It's such a beautiful thing that when that happens. And suddenly you see that not when you have compassion for the other person, it again is the same thing. It's good for you and it's good for the other person. It's good for everyone. Something magical happens there, where you turn an unpleasant situation into a positive experience. So try these things out. It is not that hard to do. Remember, one of the critical things to remember is that it's not about you when another person does something bad towards you. It's about them. They are the ones who have the problem. You don't actually have a problem at all. All you have to do is just recognize it is their conditioning that is the problem. In this way, you can start to have compassion, even for the kind of the really difficult people in the world who seem to cause so much damage and so many problems. You can have compassion even for them. Because, even though they cause problems for others, they are doing it because of their own delusion and causing even more problems for themselves than anyone else. So that is the idea of compassion in the world. Let me just do the last one as well very quickly, even though we're running out of time a little bit, because it is a nice one, even if I just read it out. So the last one is about the saint. How should you get rid of resentment for a person whose behavior by way of body and speech is pure, and who gets an openness and clarity of the heart from time to time? Suppose there was a lotus pond with clear, sweet, cool water, clean with smooth banks, delightful and shaded by many trees. Then along comes a person struggling in the oppressive heat, weary, thirsty and parched. They would plunge into the lotus pond and bathe and drink. And after emerging, they would sit and lie down right there in the shade of those trees. This is where you come into the presence of a sage, like the Buddha or maybe some of the modern meditation masters that you find in the world in the present day. And when you meet a person like that, you don't need to try very hard to kind of push aside the bad qualities, because there's only good qualities. So you dive into that pond, and you drink up the water. Whoa, this is so nice. And then when you come out and when you kind of cool down, then you hang out with that person. You lie down in the shade of that person. That's like me. That's why I kind of hang out in the shade of Ajahn Brahmali and Bodhidharma on the street. The same kind of idea. So you hang out in the shade, you stick to those smooth, beautiful banks, and you become a disciple of that person. And even though originally you were a bit angry, you become a bit angry with the Buddha because the Buddha challenged you a little bit. The Buddha says, there is no self. Yes, there is a self. I can feel it. No, there is no self. Yes, there is self. No, there is self. And eventually you kind of, Buddha is pretty cool. Okay, maybe there's something to what they're saying. And sometimes a real spiritual teacher will always challenge you a little bit. So there's always chances you might get a bit upset when you meet someone like that. But then also you recognize there's something deep going on there. And eventually you let go of your pride, you let go of your own defilements, and okay, fair enough, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And you become the disciple of this person. You lie down in the shade of those trees, and then of course you gain the benefit of being a disciple of a master like the Buddha, and you start reading the suttas, like this one here, for example. And then it finishes off by saying, in the same way, at that time you should focus on that person's pure behavior by way of body and speech, and on the fact that they get an openness and clarity of the heart from time to time. That is how to get rid of resentment for that person. Relying on a person who is impressive all around, the mind becomes confident. This is like the confidence that arises in the Buddha merely by reading the suttas and hanging around people who are impressive. A mendicant should use these 5 methods to completely get rid of resentment when it has arisen towards anyone. There you are. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.